one to all of you all. And the question is this, and I hope you'll be very specific in your answer, and that is, what should we do about the ISS after 2024? But let me set this up and frame the question in a larger way. You've got NASA's budget at $20 billion, about 0.5% of our federal budget. We spend about $3.5 billion a year on the International Space Station. We cannot have a lunar mission. We cannot continue our exploration in the deep space unless we significantly increase that budget, which we should not presume that we are able to do. Therefore, we have to make some tough decisions. We cannot have it all. Federal funding is not unlimited. I know the administration is looking towards, on the transition, that the United States would be more of a customer than an operator. But if that is still going to cost us upwards of $2 billion, that's not much of a saving. That's not going to get us back to the moon. It's not going to get us elsewhere. So what do you think we should do about the International Space Station after 2024? And Mr. Gerstenmaier, let's start with you.
Okay, I think as we've kind of discussed earlier, and you can see in the transition report, we see the need for a continued activity in low Earth orbit for an extended period of time. I think, as we heard from some of the other witnesses here, that there's a need for a continuous presence to do research. We're not done in low Earth orbit. It enables what we need to do in deep space. Some of the systems that we're going to be using to go beyond the Earth-Moon system or use in the vicinity of the Moon, those absolutely need to be tested on space.
Okay. What is our continuing presence in low Earth orbit going to cost us?
Again, I think that's what we need to start really working very hard now to go look at these models that were described earlier. We need to take serious steps forward. I mentioned earlier in my testimony that we're going to do these, ask commercial companies for studies to come back, show us their business plan, show us their market analysis, show us what we think the cost would be for operations in low Earth orbit for NASA's defined needs.
In order to have sufficient funds to, say, go back to the moon, have a lunar mission, what would be the most we could spend for human presence in low Earth orbit?
Again, I think you could see what we're able to do today with Deep Space Gateway and those activities. We believe we can support where we are today with Space Station and those type of gateway activities heading towards the moon. And then as the SLS activities ramp down, the commercial crew activities ramp down, those development funds are reduced. We go into production and ops for SLS. That frees up funds that can be used for lunar surface activities and lunar landers. So I believe roughly at the budget we have now, with some consideration for inflation and economic growth, we can support a low Earth orbit program reduced somewhat, and also a lunar activity program.
Okay, and again, you're not willing to put a cost on the low Earth orbit human presence?
I can't give you a specific value. I think what we need to do is see what comes from industry, see what's reasonable, and then do the balance, the budget analysis.
My frustration is, it seems to me that we're continuing to think we can do it all, but we're not willing to put a cost on anything. That's just the frustration. Dr. Lal.
The Chairman Smith, as you said, a presence in low Earth orbit is not the same as having an ISS, and we absolutely need to do everything we can to see if there's a way for us to be in LEO without, it costing $3 to $4 billion a year. And so, look, having, as I said in my testimony, a better analysis of whether privatizing existing parts of the station would be more cost-effective versus having free flyers, commercial stations. And according to our study, the annualized cost of a commercial station would be about $2.25 billion. So that's something to be thinking about.
It's going to be considered, but then that's a saving of only about $1 billion. The difference between roughly 3.5 or 3.3 now and the 2.25 or whatever it might be. That doesn't seem to be, to me, I mean, $1 billion is a lot of money, but it's not necessarily going to pay for lunar mission and a mission into deep space beyond that. So I see that as maybe a difference without, a distinction without much of a difference, where it's still going to cost us over $2 billion. I think the savings have to be significant if you're going to pay for significant other missions. But do you want to respond to that?
So, I mean, I was talking about the cost. There's also potential revenues, which could be between $450 million to $1.2 billion. Again, we are talking 10 years out, and predictions are hard. But the net revenue could be between negative a few million to up to positive
Okay.
700 million.
I still wonder that we're putting off the hard decisions, which isn't helpful to us, but I understand your position, so thank you for that. Dr. Cantwell.
I will say that two points first. The science portion of the budget is minuscule, and the science community is relatively agnostic as to what platform is used to conduct the science. So we have two real challenges. One is right now, the International Space Station is the only platform to which the U.S. science community has access for long-term studies.
Right.
So we would wish to see that there were other options, and the way that they are funded, we're relatively agnostic about, as long as the science community's overall costs are included in consideration of how those new developments in terms of what I call business model, what's the confluence of our federally funded access as well as commercial support and other means for having U.S. presence in LEO.
Okay. Thank you. My time has expired. With that objection, I'd like to submit 2 letters for the record on America's human presence in low Earth orbit. One is from Dr. Gail Allen, Executive Director of the American Society for Gravitational and Space Research, and the other is from Dr. Mary Lynn Dittmar, a noted expert on space flight programs. The gentlewoman from Texas, the ranking member, Ms.